We are now on the 12th day of the current government shutdown. It is a partial shutdown, and it was happening over the holidays, a period when people take time off. And so the effects for a lot of Americans were relatively easy to miss. But there have been some eye-catching headlines. Garbage, as Chris Liu just mentioned, is starting to pile up in Washington, D.C. The country's national parks are facing similar issues. The New York Times reports the shutdown is devastating Native American reservations that depend on federal money for health care and food. Just yesterday, I talked to a guy working for TSA who was working on New Year's Day but hadn't gotten paid since the government shut down. Those things are going to start compounding and getting worse. 2 weeks with no paycheck is one thing, 2 months, quite another. After meeting with President Trump at the White House today, Nancy Pelosi said she would pass legislation unanimously out of the Republican Senate to open the government, legislation that does not include, crucially, wall funding, putting the weight of the shutdown squarely on Trump's shoulders.
We're asking the president to open up government. We are giving him a Republican path to do that. Why would he not do it?
I asked him directly. I said, Mr. President, give me one good reason why you should continue your shutdown of the 8 cabinet departments while we are debating our differences on Homeland Security. He could not give a good answer.
Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. So is that my understanding, Congressman? Tomorrow you're going to pass legislation for the 8 departments other than DHS and basically say, let's just do that and sort of cordon off the DHS question?
Well, right. What is the argument for closing down the departments of state, of agriculture, of interior, of justice, of commerce, of HUD, and so on? Everybody agrees that they've got nothing to do with this conflict. It all comes down to Homeland Security. So let's pass a special bill dealing with Homeland Security, and we can take it up again in 4 weeks. We'll have time to debate it. But otherwise, this looks like just a completely petulant outbreak of obstructionism by the Republicans. And we're starting to fear that they're really just trying to ruin the inauguration of the new House and everything that we wanted to do.
Well, they were sort of spinning it that way, although I'm not quite sure I sell that. I buy that. I mean, what does it matter in terms of the inauguration? Like, you guys are going to get the gavel one way or the other.
Well, right. I mean, the whole thing makes no sense. It's irrational. Look, Donald Trump had basically agreed to drop his ridiculous demand for a border wall, which, you know, the people of Texas don't want. There's so many landowners down there who are saying will be tied up for years in eminent domain lawsuits because they don't want their backyards taken away from them by the government. So the idea that this is a solution is just absurd. But you know, he had given up on that. And then he turned on Fox News and he saw Ann Coulter and the right-wing commentators blasting him, and then he took it all back. And so suddenly it became urgent again. And so we're looking for some serious, responsible people on the Republican side to say this is not a way to run the government. And what we're giving them is bills that they endorsed either unanimously or by 90%. So they've already been for these pieces of legislation. Let's go ahead and pass it. We can isolate the problem, and then we can continue the debate for a few more weeks about the wall.
Well, but here's the thing about the wall. Like, I don't even understand what we're debating anymore, because the president, you know, the wall is this sort of constantly moving metaphor. I mean, Lindsey Graham called it a metaphor. The president has reinvented the concept of a fence several times through, you know, it's a wall you can see through, which is a fence. And then it says it's not actually that, it's just border security. Like, do you understand what the actual fight is over? Is it the $5 billion? Is that the fight?
Well, yeah, and of course the $5.7 billion is really $35 billion, because it doesn't make sense to spend $5.5 billion on a project unless you're going to go ahead and complete it.
Right.
But you're right. It's, you know, rearranging the silverware on the Titanic. We've got this monumental challenge of climate change, which the rest of the world is talking about. Record forest fires, drought, hurricanes, extreme weather events like no one has ever seen before. This is what we should be focused on. Instead, we're talking about this stupid medieval wall, which everybody across party lines thinks is ridiculous. And we're asking the Republican leadership to step up right now and help us get back to the business of government. We want to reopen the government, and then we've got legislation to reopen the democracy by getting rid of gerrymandering, by opening up the campaign finance system, and by arming people's voting rights so they can't be taken away again.
And that's the first sort of affirmative. I mean, after getting the government back and running. That's the first sort of affirmative slate of legislation that the House Democrats are going to pursue, right?
Correct, but there are other, multiple emergencies facing us as a people. We are in a gun crisis here where tens of thousands of Americans are being lost every year to firearms, and 97% of the people want a universal criminal and mental background check on all firearm purchases. If we put it on the floor, we can pass it overwhelmingly. We'll have Republican support even. If they allow it on the floor in the Senate, it will pass there. We've got to go ahead and do that. We've got to deal with climate change. We've got to deal with prescription drug prices by giving the government the power to negotiate in the Medicare program, the same power that it's got in Medicaid and VA. I mean, these are things that are practical problems that we used to know how to solve, and we can do it, but we've got to get all the obstructionism and nihilism out of the way.
Have you served in the majority before?
Well, in the Maryland State Senate, where we abolished the death penalty and passed marriage equality and, passed the toughest gun safety law in America, but not in the House. I've only been in the House for one term, so I can't wait until tomorrow comes.
Yeah, exactly. What are you most looking forward to?
Well, one of the things that struck me when I got to D.C. from Annapolis was that we were voting on all these bills, very big things like repealing the Affordable Care Act, without so much as a hearing. Now, think about that. The hearing is the heart of the legislative process. That's when you collect the data, you collect the facts, you get lots of views coming from lots of different perspectives, and even the people who've introduced the bill learn about it and improve it. But they got rid of hearings in the Republican Congress. For the most part, we were voting on bills, we were voting on constitutional amendments like the Balanced Budget Amendment that had never had a hearing before. So I pushed very strongly, and I'm proud to say it's in the rules package, for a provision saying that no bills will go through Rules Committee to the floor unless they've had a hearing first. I mean, it's a pretty basic thing, but I'm excited that we're actually going to be involved in real legislative process instead of just mobilizing everybody into partisan camps.
Yeah, spoken like a true legislator, the thing you're most excited for is hearings, which is, I think you have the right job if that's the case.
I'm going on the Rules Committee. And